inherent a bit to the success of their craft, consultants often have a pretty good ear to the streets. When the West Monroe team approached me about speaking with one of its partners, Sam Uyeno, I was all ears. There's a lot to talk about right now. Our conversation started with a focus on the intense competition utilities face in connecting new data centers and manufacturing facilities to the grid, and it evolved into how we can more efficiently manage load to lower electricity rates. From there, we touched on hot topics like tariffs and trade, a sort of pulse check on the energy industry right now through Sam's eyes. This was never intended to be a podcast episode, but he had so many insightful things to say that I wanted to share the total conversation with you. So without further ado, we'll dive right in, midstream, starting with those power-sucking data centers and what utilities ought to be considering about their new class of large load customers, right now on the Factor This podcast. So right now, there's this huge push in our space to sort of serve these data center clients that weren't even in the conversation not that long ago. And there's a rush to squeeze as much out of the grid as we possibly can to get these things interconnected in as little of a disruptive way as possible. Can you talk a little bit, Sam, about from your perspective about how disruptive first data centers and AI are to the power industry?
Yeah, it is. It's definitely disruptive because even when electrification was coming about, like electric vehicles and buildings, already there was a huge push to serve a lot more load. And it felt like overnight when ChatGPT was launched, that that load just went up astronomically. So after a couple stagnant decades of little to no growth, we are now seeing unprecedented load growth that we haven't been able to deal with before. And utility, just the utility model, utility processes, and the degree of collaboration and coordination required to build out the infrastructure has never been designed to move as fast as it will need to accommodate those new loads, whether it's AI data centers or the reshoring of manufacturing facilities.
Whether they necessarily agree with the sentiment or not, I think electric utilities are among those who are criticized often for being slow movers, and this is certainly not a time to be slow with competition heating up to serve these clients. From the utility perspective, Sam, what is this like for them? This odd gold rush.
I'd say it's both a blessing and a bane. Because I'll tell you right now, before AI data centers, before reshoring of manufacturing, a lot of our electric utilities were kind of dealing with affordability challenges and trying to clean up their electric grids and other high GHG emitting sectors. So naturally, they build infrastructure that will increase costs. Well, without having new customers and larger loads to be able to spread that cost around, you face a large affordability problem. So the idea of new loads electrifying, the idea of new data centers being built and the reshoring of manufacturing means large loads, means there's ways to receive new revenue that can distribute some of that burden and keep affordability in check. So it is a blessing in that those are new loads that can help offset some of those affordability challenges. It is a bane in that the ability for the utility to service those new customers in that short time frame just have not been done before. And there's a lot of process and regulatory precedents that is going to take some time to streamline.
And interconnection queues starting to move in some places that were jammed up before. But when you're talking about those large load customers, it's difficult to figure out which ones are actually going to come online and when, and predicting into the future. Especially when we're talking about load growth, maybe nearing 50% by 2030. How is that looking into the magic 8 ball like from that utility perspective? How do you prepare for something that we're not all that certain about?
Yeah, that's probably one of the big challenges that utilities are facing now. You have a lot of developers that are placing applications into the interconnection queue, kind of just flinging them and their prospective projects all at different maturities, and being able to figure out which ones are real and getting ready to go versus those that are aspirational. And even if they are real, well, the year over year forecast of how much load they'll need to be supported with is also can be a little bit inflated for planning purposes. So it's hard to tease through a lot of that noise.
You mentioned a second ago that these data center clients could actually lead to more efficient load management. I don't think a lot of people necessarily think about the equation that way. Could you elaborate as to how this might actually benefit the way that load is distributed across the grid?
Yeah, sure. Just a moment, because it's a little bit too full. The point that I was trying to make was more about revenue and like pricing affordability. It's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
concept that if we have new large loads that are connected to the grid, those new large loads will pay a lot of, they'll bring in a lot of revenue for the utility that can help offset existing customer prices. So that's one way of distributing it. Another kind of blessing, I think, for the data centers, especially AI enabled ones that have like the always on computations that are all around, is that that is a nice, beautiful, steady load that needs to be accommodated. So it's easier to match. If it fluctuated a lot, I think utilities would require probably more monitoring and control technologies in coordination with those data centers to be able to match supply and demand in near real time. But I do think it's helpful that it's very steady loads.
Outside of the demand flexibility equation, which I'm sure you've seen the Duke study that everyone's been talking about over the last couple of months about how flexibility can really, especially in those data center clients, can really do a lot for the grid. Have you thought about that at all? And what do you think that folks from your perspective are talking about in terms of flexibility being a part of that equation to make some of these projects actually pencil?
Yeah, there's probably a few different dimensions of flexibility, Paul, to consider there. One bit of flexibility is how much load do you need year over year, and can you ramp it? Are you willing to get connected sooner and sacrifice some of the load that you need to run your data center at full capacity with a flexible interconnection? And these are things that utilities are exploring now, because that can unlock a lot of capacity. But then there's flexibility throughout, say, a 24-hour day that maybe a utility can put some of its computational workload into well after the evening when some of the load dies down in that region, and the utility can can flex some of that load with the customer.
That makes sense. How does this benefit the customer, though? We're all talking about paying higher electricity rates, and it's fun to move electrons around, I'm sure. But when I get the email from my utility saying that my rates are going up 20% because of some boondoggle in PJM over gas prices last year in July, I'm not too happy about it.
Yeah. No, it's a good question. It's an important question. Where does the rubber hit the road? When will customers start to see some relief? The name of the game, Paul, is how do you get the best utilization out of the existing or small incremental infrastructure on the utility grid? So if you have a smooth, steady load at the data center, then you're building just enough infrastructure to service that. It's when it gets when it's not uniform and you get all those pockets, you build out infrastructure that supports the highest peaks, but it may not be used all throughout that 24-hour period or the duration of the year. So the smoother we can make these loads on as much existing infrastructure or as little incremental infrastructure, the better off customers are going to be, because that brings in more revenue for the lowest amount of infrastructure necessary to power it.
You bring up infrastructure and the co-location debate, I guess, is a crucial part of this. It's sort of bring your own beer of the power industry. Where do you stand on the co-location debate? Should it be a forced, renewable generation situation with paired batteries like every single time for these data centers?
Yeah, this is this is also an interesting topic, because if you start from the top and you think about like national edict, do we need to be a power player in AI? And I have a similar conviction. We're going to have to move fast if we want to be at the front, which is where I think we should be. So utilities will have to move faster. We will likely have to compromise on some of our carbon reduction goals in the short term, um, potentially even in the medium term. I mean, I'm not happy about the sacrifice. I certainly wouldn't want to make it, but there's a certain reality there that if we don't move fast enough, we're going to have we're going to have other challenges, as opposed to carbon reduction. It is very real. You see it in the media. You can see that Microsoft is going to bring the defunct 3 Mile Island back online. You see some arrangements with Amazon and small nuclear reactors like ordering some of those to power some of their data centers, extending coal plants and keeping them online, as well as nuclear power plants. These are very big plays that show how real this problem is. I do think co-location, to your question, is an important strategy that has to be supported, because if the infrastructure is sited somewhere where the interconnection queue is too long, the generation doesn't exist, the climate just isn't favorable to utility grid power, they're going to have to look to self-generation. And that's where some of the challenges, because most of the firm, reliable on-site generation is either going to be existing gas powered, which isn't favored by the environmentalist, or there's more advanced technologies that you would have to pair with it. So like renewables, thinking of like solar, maybe wind, storage, and we only have short-term storage right now. So you get this big potpourri of energy sources that have to be orchestrated in near real time to be able to self-generate. Or it's a lot of gas that emits carbon.
Well,
Definitely a sticky situation.
that's if you can get a gas turbine, right? There's something like up to 5 year lead times, and that just gets stretchier as you start to lose, other forms of potential generation, plus the impact of tariffs and the sort of global uncertainty economically. How viable is gas as a solution unless you were already in line for it?
Yeah, I can't speak to the specifics of the supply chain, but gas turbines, gas plant materials, or gas plant infrastructure definitely part of supply chain challenges. But that also exists on the utility side. Even if a utility had the generation capacity on its electric grid, and it could move it to that area, it's very likely to be constrained by some other piece of infrastructure, say like a substation transformer. And an overwhelming majority of those come from outside of the US, and those all have their own queues as well. Many of them are taken up by data center developers. So there are definitely supply chains with all of the existing technology and certainly future technologies.
Without setting out to do so, it feels like we sort of backed into like a policy discussion where it's sort of important to get this trade situation figured out as fast as possible, because it's hampering what we're able to do at home. Regardless of what you feel about the future of domestic manufacturing, the present is not enough to sustain what we've got going on.
Yeah, I agree. Not a trade expert, but I mean, it's one thing to have challenges with supply and demand just by sheer quantity and volume and production. It's another layer of challenges to have policies that aren't certain enough to give you price certainty and give you an idea how it could float from that supply chain to yourself. So it's so much uncertainty. It's hard to do any planning.
Sam, we've talked a lot of doom and gloom, but the sun is shining where you are out west, and the sun is shining here in New Jersey where I am. And I think that there is a silver lining to this whole thing, and that's sort of the future of abundance that AI and creating God in the machine, or whatever the hell it is that we're doing, offers to us on the back end of it. More efficient power usage that's automated by AI. We're talking about efficiency that we couldn't have imagined potentially. Where is your head at on that? What is on the other side of the rainbow for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely exciting things happening in the industry. And sorry, we're starting with so much doom and gloom, but there are some advancements. Like just talking about AI, there's a lot of projects and pilots in the works where AI is being used for grid planning, like GridX's Moonshot project. I think it's called Tapestry. They've got some interesting pilots going on where they're using AI in the grid planning process to help utilities and regional transmission operators figure out, okay, where can we site things, time series power flow to get more certainty on what can we host and what can we not host. I think AI's got a lot to give in processes that will speed up and streamline the interconnection of a lot of the energy and loads that we need to connect. I think that there's some exciting collaboration and partnerships. We were talking about it earlier, but late last year, PG&E, West Bank, and the city of San Jose announced their partnership for a net zero community. That's pretty exciting. I think they've got 3 data centers, over 200 megawatts of new data centers that are being planned, along with 4,000 residential units. And it's an interesting concept because the excess heat that's created from these data centers, which is there's a lot of heat. It's typically around the 100+ degree Fahrenheit range, could be used for like district heating and arguably district cooling through like absorption chillers. So there is some collaboration that's showing some excitement and innovation, as well as AI just being used in utility and grid planning processes, just to name a
A
few.
little birdie told me that you're headed out to our DTech Data Centers and AI event. Could you talk a little bit about the panel you're speaking on? I know you just teased the project a little bit, but about sort of what you're working on in that data center space and why it's so interesting and important right now.
We're putting together a panel right now and we're planning it. And in that panel, we have West Bank, who's the real estate developer of this net zero community, as well as Pacific Gas and Electric, who is the local utility and also the host company, I believe, of that event, and some folks from the city of San Jose. And what we're trying to highlight is through a lot of their innovation and collaboration, how are some of the challenges of this mismatched timeline between what the utility can accommodate and what data center developers would like to get connected and powered ASAP come into alignment. So through that panel, we're going to share some of the challenges we've overcome, including some of the challenges that are still on the table, because we could certainly crowdsource some more innovation.
Sam, anything we missed? I know we sort of went over a wide range of topics here, ranging everything from supply chain to consumer sentiment to data centers and ingenious ways to sort of get the generation they need and the utility perspective and all of this. But is there anything important that you feel like we didn't touch on?
Oh geez. I feel like we're barely scratching the surface, and probably
Right.
some of these other topics aren't aren't my best area of expertise, but layering over a lot of this administration's uncertainty to an already existing like Goliath of a challenge is something that needs to be addressed. I mean, utilities, developers, and communities need to start getting a pulse on all of the risk exposure they have from this new policy. It's just hard to plan anything without more certainty. I'm not an expert to speak on it, but I see it tripping up a lot of conversations and plans